Story number 1. On January 26, 1972, a flight attendant named Vesna Vulovic boarded a plane that she wasn't supposed to be on, and Flight 367 took off. She had been confused with another attendant also named Vesna, but she was excited to travel and do some shopping in Denmark, so she didn't argue about the scheduling issue. During this flight, a suitcase bomb placed in the baggage area exploded and the plane violently crashed not long after. Vesna was the sole survivor of the crash. Air safety investigators attributed her survival to being pinned down by the food cart in the fuselage as it broke away from the rest of the aircraft and plummeted toward the ground. When the cabin depressurized, the crew and passengers were blown out of the aircraft and fell to their deaths. Investigators believe the fuselage landed at an angle in a heavily wooded and snow-covered mountainside which cushioned the impact. Also, her doctors concluded that her history of low blood pressure caused her to pass out quickly after the cabin lost pressure, which kept her heart from bursting on impact. She was in a coma after being rescued from the crash. She had sustained a fractured skull which hemorrhaged, both legs were broken, 3 broken vertebrae, one of which was crushed completely. Her pelvis was fractured and several ribs were broken, and she had lacerations all over her body. Her injuries resulted in her being paralyzed below the waist. She had total amnesia from the hour of her fall to a month later. Her parents told her later that she didn't remember crashing at all until almost 2 weeks after it occurred. She recovered in a hospital from March to June of 1972, where she was under 24-hour police protection as police feared the bombers would want to finish the job. She was later awarded the Guinness World Record for surviving the longest fall to Earth without a parachute, which was 33,000 feet. Remarkably, she continued flying and didn't let her fear win. She lived a long, happy life and died in 2016 at the age of 66. Story number 2. In 2014, Peter Siebold and Michael Alsbury launched into space on the test flight of Virgin Galactic Spaceship 2. Suddenly, Peter heard a loud noise followed by a paper fluttering in the wind sound as the cabin was torn to pieces around him. He started falling and faded in and out of consciousness as he plummeted toward the desert ground. He later said that most of his memory of the fall is spotty, but he does remember trying to repair his oxygen supply and preparing his parachute, which he deployed between 10,000 and 20,000 feet. Since he deployed his chute so high, his rate of descent slowed, which gave Peter more time to focus on surviving this. He was conscious when he crashed. He was alive but injured and stuck in a bush in the desert. His injuries included a broken arm, fractured collarbone, scratched corneas, multiple bruises and lacerations, and his survival was considered to be a miracle. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, said that the breakup of the spacecraft was caused by a combination of pilot error and the pair being pressured to carry out commands in a matter of seconds while rocketing into space. So Peter Siebold survived a spaceship explosion, then a fall of more than 50,000 feet. However, his co-pilot, Michael Alsbury, tragically perished in the accident. Story number 3. Dick Williams was a 21-year-old star tennis player with a very promising athletic career ahead of him. After high school, he chose to move to the United States from Switzerland so he could go to Harvard. So he booked a ticket on a ship headed to America. He was traveling with his father, Charles, and they were so happy to start this journey with no idea what was coming. Sadly, the ship they were on was named the Titanic, and they remained on board the sinking ship helping passengers into lifeboats until the very end. Tragically, as they went to board a lifeboat themselves, Charles was killed by a falling ventilation funnel. Dick ended up in the freezing cold ocean water and managed to climb into a collapsible lifeboat which had not been fully assembled. He was submerged in water up to his waist. When rescue ship Carpathia arrived, only 11 out of the around 30 passengers aboard the half-sunken lifeboat were still alive. Williams had severe frostbite on his legs, but when the doctor on board the Carpathia told him they needed to be amputated, Williams replied, "I refuse to give you permission. I'm going to need these legs." He then walked up and down the deck of the rescue ship to restore circulation, while that doctor watched menacingly. 12 weeks later, Williams was competing again. He went on to graduate from Harvard, serve in the U.S. Army during World War I, for which he received the Croix de Guerre Award, and claimed tennis victories at Wimbledon, the 1924 Olympics, and multiple U.S. nationals. Story number 4. Bahia Bakery was traveling with her mom on Yamenia Flight 626 to visit her family when their plane crash landed in the Indian Ocean. The crash killed everyone on board the plane but her. She was 13 years old at the time of the accident in 2009. Cold, alone, terrified, and in shock, she managed to hold on to debris from the crash for over 9 hours, unable to see and battling the choppy water which was doing its best to tear her away from safety. When she was discovered by a rescue party, she was too exhausted to swim to their boat, so a sailor named Labuna Selemani Matrafi swam out to meet her. She was treated in a French hospital for a broken collarbone, hypothermia, bruising, and multiple lacerations. In 2010, Bakery released a memoir entitled Moi Bahia, La Miraculi. In it, she wrote that at first, she thought she'd fallen through the plane's window after pressing her forehead against it to look outside. Steven Spielberg reportedly wanted to adapt the book, but Bakery turned him down, because, quote, "it would be too terrifying. Nobody could act out the pain I felt in those moments."